This is Rebase.
So what do you do for a living? Oh yeah? How's that? These are questions you hear on a regular basis. And maybe you used to answer with excitement, with passion, with joy, but now you dread even answering the question. Well, I'm here to tell you this is not a show that's going to tell you how to quit your job and start a new company. Maybe that's not for everybody. It is, however, a show that will help you to rediscover your purpose, that passion, that joy, and that fulfillment in what it is you do. Or, if nothing else, you might figure out what it is you should be doing on a daily basis. This is Rebase. We're here to help you transform your career and change your life. Hey everybody, welcome to the Rebase show, where my goal is to provide you with the tools that you need to reinvigorate your passion and your purpose in your work. If you're not here for that, refunds are available at the ticket counter. Today's episode is brought to you by Tickle You Elmo, the hilariously misguided and inappropriate follow-up to the popular children's toy. I'm just kidding. Nobody sponsors this show. My guest today is an entrepreneur, coach, and speaker whose goal and purpose is to revolutionize the way the world thinks about careers and making money. She's also happens to be a dear friend and an all-around amazing human being, Elatia Abate.
Woo! Hey, Sean, how's it going? I'm so excited to be here with you.
It's going wonderful. How are you doing?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I'm in sunny Los Angeles.
Nice.
Beautiful here.
How is the weather there? Let's make some small talk.
Oh my God. Oh, it is fabulous. It is sunny and beautiful and delicious. Quintessential California day, not a cloud in the sky. Nice. Beach weather, everything amazing.
It is probably 120 degrees here in Austin right now. And
ooh, toasty.
Yeah, it feels like walking on the sun, but still, I love it.
A little extra space to fry some eggs on the side.
Exactly. Saves on the power bill.
Exactly.
So, aside from my lackluster description, how would you describe what you do?
Yeah, I love it. So, what I'm really up to underneath all of the excitement of coaching people into careers that are more fulfilling and advising companies on how to create talent strategies that not only bring better candidates in, but create more exciting environments to work in. The business I'm really up to is helping people unleash their potential and unleash their souls and lives. Because there's a whole lot of freedom in living that way.
Sounds like you set the bar pretty low there.
Well, most of us, unfortunately, after I quit the corporate world, or as I was quitting the corporate world, I discovered that in the U.S., almost 70% of people, and globally that number goes up to 87% of people, are disengaged or highly disengaged at work, which I read as bored to miserable or worse. And it's bonkers to me that more than half of us spend more than half of our waking hours doing something that's boring or makes us feel bad. And so I'm really out to change that because I don't think it needs to be that way.
So how did you get into working for yourself then?
Yeah, so before I quit the corporate world, most of my career I spent in some way, shape, or form recruiting, scouting, hiring, finding talent all over the world. And I ran global recruiting for Anheuser-Busch InBev, which is now, almost a 200,000 person organization, and for Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal, a big media company. And in my time there, in the thousands of interviews that I've done, I kept on bumping up against the same end to interview, which is more or less like, Sean, you're amazing. You can do this job I have to offer you, but what in the world are you doing talking to me about this job when you're so clearly passionate about something else? And this was something that happened all around the world. So it wasn't, US specific. It was Brazil, China, Russia. And it was from the C-suite, the most senior people in the company, all the way down to the interns. And so for me, what I want to do, the exciting piece for me is getting people turned back onto a professional life that's amazing and interesting and engaging. And this is a problem that costs companies, billions of dollars in lost productivity every year. When you've got unhappy people, they're just not performing at peak. So that's what got me into working for myself. And initially, I started just by coaching people one-on-one, and then that developed into classes and workshops and speeches that I give. And now, of course, I work with everybody from Fortune 500s to startups to major universities to folks who want a career switch.
Nice. So is that a question, the question that you mentioned of, clearly you're qualified for this position and we'd love to have you, but obviously you're more passionate about something else. Is that a question you would actually ask in interviews or close that interview with? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And what were some of the answers you would get to a question like that?
A lot of the answers that I get to questions like that are stuff like, oh, I would do that, but it's not realistic. I would do that, but you can't make any money at it. Mm-hmm. I would do that, but I'm too young, I'm too old. I do that but I can't because I have a mortgage to pay. All of these things, but really what all of those things are, they're assumptions. So why is it that people don't go for what they want? Why is it that most of us don't dive into careers or pursue careers that are a lot more fulfilling? Mm-hmm. It's because we know we want to be happier. We know we're capable of being happier. But why don't we go? Because of the stack of assumptions that we create that make the distance between where we are and where we really like to be seem so far and so overwhelming to tackle that we just end up staying where we are. And some of those assumptions are things like I mentioned, right? I'm too young, I'm too old, I don't have enough experience, I don't have enough money. Almost none of those assumptions are actually true. Mm-hmm. When we start to pick them apart, they're just reasons that we decide that we can't have stuff. But then the other stuff like the mortgage or the house payment or I've got to pay back my student loans, those things are real. But the logic is incorrect in thinking that that's preventing someone from having a more fulfilling career. Mm-hmm. That simply just becomes a parameter to help you define what your next role is going to be. So for, let's say the argument, $100,000 a year is what I make. And, so I have my mortgage and I have my college loans and whatever else. Well then, okay, great. But I bet that your job is not the only job in the world that pays $100,000. I mean, I'm just going to throw that out there, right? Like there might be one or two other ones out there in the world. And so
there isn't, I checked.
Yeah, I know, right? Like I'm crazy. But so once you begin to use that as a parameter, it's like, okay, you're not going to make a move for less than $100,000. Beautiful. Now what?
So basically getting people to, put their conditions and their terms like out there in the world and then be able to actually make a move because they say, I need to make at least $100,000, or I need to be able to support my family, or I need to not travel or whatever that may be. So
exactly,
basically removing those excuses or rationalizations or assumptions, as you said, and then getting them to the area where they believe it's actually possible. Yeah.
Well, they see it's possible, right? And so I don't ever tell anybody. I mean, I can tell you something, that your belief isn't, that it's an assumption that you've created in your mind. But the more interesting thing is for me to have a conversation with you in which you come to that realization yourself. So then, like, you got it. Mm-hmm. And so you can now then see, oh, wait, I created my own prison. Hold on. That means I can dissolve it as well and create something that's more interesting for myself.
Nice. Yeah, there's an old saying that I'm going to butcher. It's something to the effect of if you tell somebody something, they may hear you. If you show them, they may believe you. But until they experience it, not until they experience it, will they truly understand.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Like, no matter how credible I am, if I'm speaking words at you, if you haven't had the experience of it, you're going to, you might walk in faith and listen to me, but there's going to be some doubt there. But if you get it yourself, then
for sure,
then it's yours.
Amazing. So how long ago did you start working for yourself?
3.5 years ago.
Nice.
3.5 years ago. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your first client or your first really impactful client experience that helped you to realize that, yes, I'm doing the right thing. I'm really, I made the right decision. This is my purpose. The impact that you had on somebody, and feel free to, leave out names of the involved parties, but I'm always curious about that for anybody who's branching out on their own, because there's usually an aha moment or like a turning point, right, where you realize, wow, yes, this is the juice. This is
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
was like
totally.
made and put here to do.
Yeah. So it happened really early on. I had an opportunity to teach a class, a business boot camp at General Assembly, which is, it's sort of like a global network of co-working slash coding classes slash other kinds of career related classes. But really, it was born out of to create a space for entrepreneurs to come together and think about important stuff. Yeah. So I taught a business boot camp for them in conjunction with the new school at Parsons School of Design in New York. Okay. It was a business boot camp. It was all about strategy and innovation and creative thinking in growing businesses. This was to a group of 40 entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And the magic of being up at the front of that classroom and watching the light come on in people's eyes as they started to realize that some of the reasons why their businesses weren't going as fast as they thought they should be is all up here in their own minds. It's all the constructs that they created around their business. And so when people started to realize that and then create more creative solutions for themselves, then I was like, okay, like here's the magic. This is really where the good stuff is.
Nice. How do you find that I'm going to go a little bit off on a side tangent here. I find that creativity is lacking a lot in the workplace in general these days. And to me personally, being able to exercise that creative muscle is really one of the things that for most people, it kind of gets them to come alive. When you've got a classroom of business people and entrepreneurs and business owners who are probably like trying to check all the boxes and trying to make sure that, all their finances are up to date and, they're not violating any major tax laws or employment laws or things like that. How do you get them to stop and think creatively? Like, oh, wow, I never realized that problem was mostly in my mind and I can actually solve that any one of these 5 ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is to introduce creativity and creative thinking not as something separate from business, but as a part of the business process, right? And in fact, an accelerator to better, more interesting, more lucrative kinds of solutions to challenges that are available. And depending on the group that I'm talking to, there are ways to make a business case for it. So something that I'll often do if I'm working with straight up executives or folks who are used to more traditional kinds of thinking and planning is I'll show them there's a great video that it's an interview from 60 Minutes. Charlie Rose interviewed David Kelly from IDEO, which is the big design consulting firm. Mm-hmm. And so design thinking as a way of problem solving, a human-centric way of solving problems can feel not businessy because it's play, it's prototyping, it's asking questions, it's going out into the world and interviewing people. Mm. But when you see the impact that IDEO has had in terms of the kinds of products that have been created, so Apple, Xylus, TiVo, like all of the wide range of products and tangible business impact that way of thinking has created, then that opens up enough space for people to be like, okay, I can try this out.
Nice. So showing them successes in the industry where people are using that kind of thinking and applying it to their business. That's excellent.
Exactly. So it's kind of making the bridge for folks.
Nice. So, you talked a lot about teaching entrepreneurs and teaching business owners, the people that, no offense to entrepreneurs and business owners, but the people that I'm really hoping to reach with, this show are people who prefer being employees. They do not want to run their own business. They would rather not spend, 18, 20 hours a day, living, sleeping, eating, and breathing their business, but they might be employees or contractors, freelancers, what have you, and to really help them to, find that passion and that drive and maybe what got them into what it is they're doing in the first place. Your experience, how often do you find that some of the people that you work with who are employees, that they maybe don't need a drastic change, like a complete career shift, but maybe they just need to tweak 1 or 2 things about their job or change their perspective? And what's the balance there, just, from your, 3.5 plus years of coaching and mentoring and working with people?
Yeah. God, that's a great question. What's the balance? usually when people come to me, they're at a breaking point of some kind. Like, it's just like, I hate this, I want to leave, or, I'm getting fired, or, some semblance of that. That said, it does happen occasionally that folks will come to me with, gosh, I want to be happier at work. And so so I think I want to quit my job and do something else. And one of my first questions is, well, it isn't even a question. It's just like, walk me through what's going on. And so a lot of the tweaks that can happen in order to make work fabulous. And even if people are going to quit like a more traditional job and go do something else, there's almost always a period of time in which they are still working at a job before they move on to a next piece, and so all of it is the same mindset shift. So the first distinction that I talk with people about is the distinction between being an owner and being a victim, or which I refer to as being a captain or a captive, right? So many people cede the power of their happiness, their fulfillment, their professional growth to circumstances external to themselves. Oh, it's because my boss is a jerk. Oh, it's because nobody on my team does the work. Oh, it's because the economy, is because there aren't any clients. I mean, whatever the list is. So all of that is why I'm not happy, which is never the case, right? We can blame that and we can use that, but all that does is just puts us in a victim role, right? Like just waiting for someone to come and save me and just fix it and make it better.
Else, right? Puts the blame completely on somebody else. There's nothing you can do to change your conditions.
Exactly.
Right.
And when in fact, we all have the power to change our conditions only all the time. And that's when I talk to people about becoming an owner of their circumstances and of what it is that they're creating. And all this to say, I myself have to remember to do that and have to learn how to do that sometimes. So in January of this year, I put all of my stuff in storage to embark on a journey, a year-long journey to figure out what it will mean to empower success in the uncertainty of this economy. And so I've been traveling all over the world. I mean, I'm teaching, speaking, consulting the same way that I usually do, but I have this layer of experience on top of it, which is, my own life experience plus, interviewing thought leaders around the world and the things that are impacting the future of work. So it's day 47 of this trip, and I get onto a plane in Los Angeles, California. I fly 3,000 miles to Miami, Florida. I walk off the plane. I walk up to the rental car counter, and I'm there with my tote bag and looking for my wallet with my driver's license in it. So I'm standing there, and my bag is full of stuff because this is all I'm traveling with for a year. I've got just carry-ons. I'm opening the bag and looking through the stuff and opening the bag and looking through the stuff. And so I have to step away from the counter, and all of a sudden, I dumped out the bag and there was still no wallet. And so I'm standing there in an airport by myself in Miami, my stomach sinks, my heart's pounding, my face is flushed, and I'm like, what did I do to my life? This is horrible. I'm crying, just the whole mess, right? But no amount, so I was just being a victim, right? And no amount of wishing and hoping and, anything was going to conjure that wallet back. But there I am sitting in the airport oh no, I'm going to have to live in the airport in Miami forever. And then it's okay, well, I can sit here and cry about it, or I can decide to take action for myself. So I call my friend. Remember, I have a friend in Miami. Call my friend who says, don't cancel your credit cards. Uber yourself to this spot. I'll come and get you. You can stay with me. I'll lend you money and get you on to the next place where you're safe. So it's not to say that, certainly even those of us who practice this all the time don't get ourselves into positions of being victims. But the important thing to do is, as soon as you notice it, realize that you don't need to stay there and to create a better alternative for yourself.
Gotcha. It's amazing that you can snap yourself out of that so quickly. I work on the same thing myself, and it takes me a couple days longer than what you described. But
well, I'd be lying if I didn't say that there wasn't a bit of a hangover of bad feeling for the days subsequent to that. I mean, I saw you in Austin the days post that event, so that it was a bit of a bummer. But that said, I could have let it sit for weeks and weeks, or, it could have been the amount of time that it was. And this is one of those things that you practice, right? When I first started doing this a couple of years ago and getting some real awareness around it, it could still be several days that I would feel like crap. nap, and then it just goes down to like 2 days, and then 1 day, and then half a day, and then 20 minutes, and so it's just a practice.
Gotcha. So, I think that's a good advice, and something that people may not pick up on is that something like this skill is not something you just learn and then it clicks, right? It is eternal vigilance on, being the keeper of your own happiness and well-being.
Totally. Yeah. You got to be the guardian at the gate of your mind. And this is, Tony Robbins talks about that a lot. And that's something that, that the more I experience, the more truth there is in that. We have to, in order to create a life that's truly fulfilled and not just be buffeted around by the circumstances, by external circumstances, we've got to stand guard and protect that like crazy.
Nice. I love it. So going back to and kind of talking about employees, people are employees, right?
Yeah.
What is, in your opinion, the most important skill people who are employees or freelancers maybe should be developing? What is the skill they should be developing, but they aren't, or maybe they have no idea that they should be developing that skill?
Yep. So a few different things. So as I mentioned, I'm doing this whole project around the future of work and what it's going to mean for us to empower success. And when I'm out here doing this research, it's not just for people who are entrepreneurs, but it's for everybody, because the velocity of change that is about to hit our workforce and our marketplace is going to be so fast that we've got to figure out new skills to help ourselves be successful. And so a couple of different things in the space of education and the kind of the things that we need to learn how to do. Just the first one, which is more about an understanding of the marketplace, but paying attention to what industries and careers are in ascension and decline, meaning which ones are most likely to be taken over or not by computers or robots. So that if I were a truck driver today, I'd be thinking, because self-driving trucks are already here, I'd be thinking about what my next career move is going to look like in the coming years, understanding that there's going to be a shift there. Mm-hmm. So that's just general understanding. But the skills of entrepreneurship are critical. Mm. Even if you're employed, if you're a freelancer, you are increasingly going to have to market yourself, figure out what product it is or what idea it is that you're selling. And in order for it to get adapted, or in order for you to get hired as a freelancer, you're going to have to be able to sell that. Mm-hmm. You're going to have an increased tolerance for risk, because things are going to be moving around a lot more. So kind of exercising that muscle. So entrepreneurship is a big piece. Okay. Another big piece is understanding how you learn. So the rate at which technology and other things are going to be changing our world is going to require us to learn a lot more, a lot faster. Mm. And so if you can understand yourself and how you learn very well, then you can accelerate your speed of adapting new information. So there's going to be that piece. And then the third piece is around sort of mindset and experimentation, and looking. So there's Carol Dweck's fabulous book Mindset, where she talks about fixed mindset and growth mindset. So it's less worry about finding a right answer and more ability to approach work and problem solving and everything as a process of experimentation or discovery. Because with things changing so quickly, even if everything would be perfect today, tomorrow the landscape is going to be different. Right. So being able to adapt and change is going to be critically important.
Interesting. So you talked about skills of entrepreneurship for those of us who, aren't entrepreneurs. Obviously, being adaptable to change and being able to adjust as, the landscape changes is a huge one of those things. And you mentioned selling yourself as well, like, your personal brand, if you will, to use a, overused term. What are some of the other skills of entrepreneurship that people should be looking into for themselves?
Yeah. Sales. Okay. And sales meaning, but being able to sell your ideas. Okay. Right. So being able to communicate. So I guess more than sales, it's even communicate clearly the benefits of what it is that you are able to do, or able to provide, or the kinds of problems that you're able to solve. Mm-hmm. So really good storytelling is something that comes into mind in thinking about that. Also, something that I've always thought should be taught to all employees in any company is just a real clear understanding of where whatever it is that they're doing fits inside the context of the business and of the end consumer. So often in companies, it's funny. I was at I was at a startup based out of LA here today, and having a lot of conversations about what customer service is and how you create employee engagement and different things like that. And one of the places where things start to get off track is when people who are employees forget that their job doesn't exist just to check off the boxes of duties that job has, but rather that job exists in service to a customer or to a client or to something outside of their own universe. And so getting clear about where one fits inside of that universe and what the impact is of work and the ownership of doing a job well done, not only in terms of just the job itself, but in service to that client, is something that I think is critically important and that most people still don't understand.
True. Yeah, I struggle with that one a little bit because I totally agree with you that as an individual, you need to know, what role you play in the bigger picture and what the bigger picture is. From a leadership or management standpoint, I'm a firm believer that it is up to leadership to clearly communicate the purpose of what it is you are building, or when you are, pressing the button down the assembly line for, making new widgets, like what your role is and like how that vision for the company all fits together. So it's interesting to me how, I agree with you. As an employee, if you don't know why it is you're doing what you're doing for your company, then you're already at a loss. But from a company standpoint, it really is on leadership in order to communicate that clearly. Otherwise employees have to seek it out and they might go to the wrong source.
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely up to leadership, and, even with strong leadership in place, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this. A customer service team starts to get mad at the customers who are calling the call center, like they're bothering them or something. Like, where does that come from? You're there to help this customer out, right? But it's those kinds of things, even with great leadership, that just sometimes we forget, right? Or especially in stressful situations and that sort of thing. So, whether it comes from leadership or elsewhere, that's still is something. Understanding the business context of what it is that you're doing is an incredibly useful tool.
Awesome. On the note of storytelling, because that's something I'm extremely interested in recently, and I've been delving into it a lot. What's a resource or two resources that I could put in the show notes even for improving that skill? Because I completely agree that communication, storytelling, and sales, like all these things are kind of interlinked. And especially coming from a software background, I'm a firm believer that software is no longer a technical problem. It is now a communication and a people problem. Right? Mm-hmm. We have advanced software platforms where you can build a website from your garage in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And so in order to build working software over time, we have to be able to communicate, across large organizations. So storytelling and being able to communicate with other people effectively, do you have some examples that, you would go to say, you don't know storytelling from scratch, like here's where you should go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a place so there are two things. One, exploring Joseph Campbell and his work. So for those who are listening who don't know who Joseph Campbell was, and I didn't know who he was until just a couple of years ago, which is like, I discovered him and then my world blew up. I'm like, oh my God, where have you been my whole life? He was, when he was alive, one of the world's foremost mythologists and a spiritual kind of a philosopher. He was a professor at Sarah Lawrence University, and he spent his whole career traveling the world, researching all of our religions and myths and stories and fairy tales to figure out what is common about the human experience. And he maps what he called a hero's journey, which is only the plot line to every single movie, book, fairy tale, Bible story that you have ever, listened to or read in your life, which is more or less like, the hero, either he has some yearning to go seek his fortune or, is forced out into the world by the universe. Think Luke Skywalker, and he comes home in a black smoking hole and no family and no anything, and he's forced off on his adventure. So you go on the adventure and, you started out and some people help you out, and then you face some obstacles, and then there's some big battle at the end and you get like, the grail or the girl or the guy or whatever. And then you come back to the community from whence you came and you share what you earned with everybody else, right? So he maps that out incredibly well. And he does it in a way, and you can listen to, there's a beautiful series of interviews that he does with Bill Moyers called The Power of Myth. So for the folks listening, they don't even have to read it. They can just listen to it. But just by understanding what that simple story arc is and how we communicate, like what are the elements of a story that make it interesting, that's a wonderful place to go. A second wonderful thing to do in terms of storytelling is if you're living in any city in the U.S. that's got an improv comedy class to take, go take it. Just go get yourself in one. Doesn't matter if you've never acted before. It doesn't matter. It teaches you a phenomenal amount about storytelling and speaking on the fly, which are kind of two interconnected things, especially in the corporate space.
Absolutely. I mean, I prepared for about 6 hours for this interview, so I think could be beneficial.
Yeah, awesome. I love it.
Well, thank you for that. So one last deeper sort of question, and then I got a couple of rapid fire if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
But so for most of us, unless you're a complete solopreneur or whatnot, but for most of us, who we work with and who we have to interact with and who we get to interact with plays a pivotal role in how fulfilled we might be, and even opportunities for advancement and things like that. When you or one of your clients or somebody you've coached has somebody that they must work well with, but they really just can't seem to stand each other, they can't get along, there's just differences of philosophy or whatever it may be, like, do you have any tips that you've seen work really well with folks in those situations? And I think if you've been in any industry long enough, right, longer than a year or two, you run into somebody where you think, God damn it. If they would just see things my way, my life would be much easier.
It'd be beautiful.
And they're complaining to their spouse about the exact same thing about you. Right?
Yeah.
So what advice might you give to dealing with these like difficult people who you think are just like, that nemesis out to get you?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that comes to mind as you ask me that is an important distinction that I work with a lot of my clients on, which is the distinction between the world as we wish it were and the world as it is. Right. So a lot of making this kind of stuff work is stopping wishing that it were different. Right. So you're not going to change a person's mind. You're not going to be able to, in most cases, change the fact that you're working on a project with this person. So get over that and say, okay, given this, what do I want to create now? So the world is this. So given that the world is this way, what do I want to create? That's the first thing. Second thing, again, going back to that owner-victim kind of distinction, instead of thinking stuff like, I've just got to get through this. I've got to, just handle this. This is like, oh God, like I don't want to get through anything. Like that sounds horrible. The more
sounds
interesting
like
way,
childbirth, honestly.
I know, right? Like punch me in the face. Of course I don't want to go to work. But it'd be like, what can I get from this?
Okay.
Right. So you turn the situation into, okay, so like I want to punch this person in the face. I want to punch myself in the face. But rather than doing that, what can I get out of this? How can I become a better leader? How can I practice my arbitration and negotiation skills, figuring out the value that you can extract out of it from yourself and then turning that into a game. Like how many times could I get this person to agree with me today? How many times could I get this person, because then it just becomes like, okay, cool. Now it's something fun that I'm up to. And then the third thing that I would say, in my experience, when things start to go off track and we get unhappy, it's because we're way too focused on ourselves. We're obsessed with ourselves. And so instead of worrying about what my experience is like, turning around and saying, how might I be of service here? How can I contribute to this? How can I make the situation better? And when I stop thinking about me and start focusing on adding value and creating value for the team, for the other person, for the company, then the annoyance goes away because it's not about me anymore. It's about creating something bigger than myself.
Amazing. It's awesome that you mentioned that. I've got something that's rattling around in this, void of my brain. um, that's summarized as work isn't about you.
Yeah.
Like, work isn't about you. Accept it, get over it, find your true customer/customers, which most of us have multiple customers, be they internal, be they your actual company customers, and serve them with like all of your being.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, and it, in my life experience, nothing that we do is about us. It's just not. And the way that the world works and the way, in fact, that our brain wiring is we as human beings flourish the most when we are giving to others, when we are sharing with others, when we're collaborating with others. It just, we fire better, other people fire, like, it just is better. Not only for sort of, like the good feels, but also biologically we're wired to create that. And so, there's a great book, actually, I'm looking at it right now, The Book of Joy, that's a couple of, like 10 days, I think, of interviews of the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And this is one of the things that they talk about, compassion and caring for others. And none of it's about us. It's just not.
Awesome. So, lightning round. Are you ready?
Yes.
Jump into some lightning round questions.
Marks, I go.
Okay. I will try to speak slowly because otherwise I'll get really caught up. That Northeasterner in me comes out. I start talking like this and nobody can understand a word I'm saying.
I love it.
If you could introduce one new subject into schools, K through 12, right? K through 12 education, and have it be mandatory for everybody, what would it be?
Yep. Hero's journey, hands down.
Okay.
That everything we do in life, how we learn, what we go through, all of our trials and tribulations, anything we want to create, it's all a hero's journey, same repeatable pattern. So we don't have to freak out about anything. We don't need to worry about stuff. It's just figuring out, I'm at this part of the cycle. Oh, this is the hard part of the cycle, but that'll be done soon. But teaching the hero's journey.
If I can just meet Obi-Wan Kenobi and get into Act 2, everything will be okay.
That is, you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it.
Perfect. Awesome. Are you familiar with the concept of and the study of flow state and other altered states?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love this and I'm obsessed with it right now. When it comes to triggering one of those states, for those who aren't familiar, flow state would be a like highly focused, selfless, effortless state of being and creativity, where maybe you're writing or you're drawing or you're creating or you're putting together a PowerPoint presentation and the world's blocked out. You sort of black out and you wake up and you're like, hey, where was I?
Here we are 8 hours later.
Exactly. Yeah. Or it feels like 8 hours later and it was 20 minutes. When it comes to those states, do you have any things that you do to like trigger them and like get into that state?
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Share it with me.
Yeah. I use music a lot. So I've got a lot of soundtracks that I jam to, and I'll turn music on and I'll jump around and I'll dance and I'll sing and I'll do, just everything to get myself up and pumped and moving. What I'll also do while I have the music on, so let's say like I'm going to create a class or, I'm working on a book or something like that. So I need to create some structure. I'll put those big Post-it note things, those easel size Post-it notes all around the room, have a pile of markers there. And like, as the music's on, just answer the questions, start to structure stuff and write it out and let it go. And then that often just incites the whole thing.
Awesome. That's amazing. I'm going to steal both of those. What's your favorite? Yeah. What's your favorite soundtrack to jam and work to?
Oh God. Well, so I spent a lot of time in the Tony Robbins world. And so the soundtracks from his events like Date with Destiny and Unleash the Power Within. We've got a cameo for those watching on video of Edie.
I thought she was literally going to just walk across the screen and exit stage left.
So she decided to camp out for a while.
If you're listening to this and not watching, I will post a picture so you can see.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, totally. So I'll listen to the Tony stuff, and honestly, the like one of my favorite tracks from that is the song "We Own It" from Fast and Furious 6. It's so good. I love this song so much. A couple of weeks ago, I gave a TEDx talk, and like in the space of time before I went on, so I wouldn't get like all up into my head, I just blasted that in my ears, was backstage just like slamming out to it over and over again on repeat. And then it was like, oh, it's my turn. Okay, let's go.
They're like tapping you on the shoulder.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, it's my jam. Hold on.
Hold on, there's 2.5 minutes left of this hook.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah, I found a blog post a while back that had, for writers, it was 10 of the best soundtracks to focus to Social Networks, Stranger Things, Midnight Special. Just all instrumental stuff that I'm just like, that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about that, but their music is an excellent tool, which I think that most people don't tend to go to or think of. They think of it as pleasure, but not, a tool they can bring into their work.
Yeah.
In the creative space.
Yeah. And I also do, so Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. I'm part of this awesome mastermind that meets every morning for an hour. And we have created these personal statements based on the framework that Napoleon Hill offers. And so another way that I use to get myself into flow state is it's a statement. And when I say we read them to each other in the morning, that's like the understatement of the century. Like we shout them at each other and it's like, this is what we're creating. This is how awesome we're crushing it. And this is how fabulous it is. So you get yourself into such a peak state that the flow then also just comes easily.
Nice. You touched on something else there that I think is really important. That's to find people whose crazy matches your crazy.
Yes. Yeah. It's way more fun when you got others in the boat with you.
Awesome. So, I started this show, like I mentioned before, because not everybody wants to, and probably not everybody should, start a Google, Tesla, Kickstarter, Uber, whatever. And those places will be nowhere without an amazing staff. So do you have one piece of advice for somebody who wants to create something great or contribute to something great, but they don't want to be the guy or the gal?
Yeah. Add massive value, meaning solve problems. Look for problems to solve. That is the best way to create amazingness inside of any organization. And in anything and anyway, right? It's this idea of going out into the world and figuring out what could I solve? What do I have the skills to do? How can I contribute here? So look for problems to solve and then solve them without being asked to.
Nice. I promised the audience that was not a plant question or a plant answer, because my next question is, what are you working on right now, or what is a challenge you're dealing with right now that maybe somebody even in the audience could help you out with?
That's a great question. So one, I have, and I'm sitting here, I have dining room walls full of challenges that I brain dumped the other day. And so I'm looking at how to solve this. One of the things that I'm working on right now is growing my social media size, scale, and scope. Like as I look back on what I would have done differently that I didn't do, so I'm sort of catching up on right now, is having killer marketing plan. Mm-hmm. And there are a million reasons why that didn't happen, but now it's happening. And then the second piece is really increasing, because of all this future of work research that I've been doing. Now I'm sort of in the space as a thought leader on this topic. And so I'm in the process of building the pitch deck to go in and speak at big companies about what the future of work is. So figuring out what that's going to look like, who I'm going to talk to, what the positioning is, all of that kind of stuff. That's where I am with. So almost like
a project manager / sort of like, not even brand consultant, but something along those lines.
Exactly. Like I need if I had like a whole room of manager leader folks on all these different projects, that would be like from my mouth to God's ears. That's
So it sounds like the answer to this may be a lot of things, but pick one. What's one thing right now you're working on that excites you to no end? Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh God. Yeah, like everything. And
it's not a viable answer.
I know. One of the things that I'm working on right now that's really exciting to me is bringing the conversation around the future of work and what that is and what that means into today. So when we read in the media or when people are talking about the future of work, like robots and stuff like that, it seems like it's something like way out here in some Jetsons future that's never going to come to pass. It's not tangible. But the moment that we're living in right now, I equate it to, so like in a tsunami, when the birds stop chirping and like it gets eerily quiet and people start to kind of look around and are like, something's weird's here. the tsunami is already happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the wall of water has not come rushing at the shore yet. And that's the moment that we're in right now in terms of how the work world is going to shift, how it's going to change. So it's already happening. A lot of us haven't really felt it yet, but a lot of us, as you can see in the media by so many people being disgruntled about things, like there's just something weird going on. So there's like uncanny sense that we know.
Right.
But yeah, so bringing the conversation around the future of work from out here at some distant future point to now.
Right, where we are, and is the tsunami, basically here or on its way.
Yeah, and understanding that just like the massive amount of change, all it is massive opportunity. Mm-hmm. And it's just going to look different than it's looked up until now. So figuring out like, okay, here comes a tsunami. How big of a surfboard do we need?
Mm-hmm. I'd recommend not surfing a tsunami. That's my legal disclaimer, thanks to my legal department. I don't know. Are you familiar with?
Your legal department, your dog Maximus?
Yeah, he's right over here. He just sort of like grunted a little bit. So, are you familiar with Kevin Kelly? By chance, he's the former co-founder of Wired magazine. He's an author, technologist.
I'm not. I don't know him.
People are familiar with him. If anybody doesn't like Kevin Kelly, their problem with him is that he's never wrong. So he's a futurist, and he predicts all of these trends. He has a great book, which the title is escaping me right now, but it's essentially like the inevitable 12 trends.
Awesome.
Of the future.
Yeah.
Virtual reality, virtual and augmented reality, and things like that. Your comment about basically this change being right here on our doorstep rather than out in the future. He had a really good interview where he made a comment about artificial intelligence, and he said, we will find or discover or create artificial intelligence eventually, but it doesn't matter because we won't even call it. We won't even know when we did it, and we won't call it artificial intelligence whenever we invent it. We'll just call it machine learning, right? Like we keep evolving and creating these huge technological breakthroughs, but because it is iterative and it seems slower, once it's upon us, we'll look back and be like, holy shit, I should have seen that coming 5 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, so it's really interesting. So I was speaking with an analyst at a large investment bank, and we were talking about shifts in the retail space. Mm-hmm. And so what's been happening in retail, if you're not paying attention to the news, which is one of the reasons why this whole future of work thing is really interesting to me. So many retail stores across the US are closing. Like, and even just 2 days ago, there's, additional retail shops, brick and mortar shops closing. And why are they closing? Because based on very logical projections a couple of years ago, they grossly underestimated adoption of e-commerce. So it's not like people weren't planning smartly before. It's that we didn't understand the accelerated rate of adoption and impact that technology would have. And that's where exactly what you're saying, right? Like, so we're not seeing it happen as quickly or as directly here, but it's already here, right. And like it's happening quickly. And so what happens when an economic crash happens, right? We often, people who get laid off from traditional white collar kinds of jobs, where do they go to work? The service industry and retail. Mm-hmm. Well, these retail jobs aren't there anymore. Exist, yeah. And service industry is one of the first industries that's going to be computerized and taken over by robots and that sort of thing. So what happens in this situation? Again, it's not all doom and gloom, but if we want to get out in front of the wave, then we got to start thinking about solutions.
Right. You have to be thinking about what would you do in the scenario you described if you had to take on a quote unquote blue collar job, or, a job that you might be overqualified for. What do you do if that job doesn't exist? Right.
Exactly. How do you create value? And so recently I've become obsessed with this idea of just like, how do I get paid to exist? How does one, not just me, but like, how does a person just get paid to live so that we aren't at the mercy of a company or a job or something? Like how many income streams could we create? What does that look like? So yeah, there's just some of the things that I'm nearly, I don't even remember what the original question was.
It's fine. I blacked out for about 5 minutes.
I'm assuming that's because we're in flow state here.
Totally. to steal a page from Gary Vaynerchuk's book, you're right. It's not all doom and gloom. We live literally in the most exciting time and the greatest time in human history. Despite all the doom and gloom you might see in the media, for the most part, diseases are at an all-time low, violence is at an all-time low, worldwide, and using a $50 webcam and computer and whatever, we can talk and we can publish this online for anybody to see.
That's awesome. Yeah.
There are people,
freaking amazing.
I mean, not to call anybody out individually, but what's the guy's name? PewDiePie, guy who this guy makes, I think, 7 figures, basically showing videos of him playing video games online with some weird voice. Maybe it's his real voice. Apologize if that's the case. But people like that, YouTube stars and mommy bloggers and wannabe amateur chefs who publish recipe books that people download. It's not all doom and gloom, right? We have so many opportunities available to us that we just have to not necessarily even go out and figure out what our opportunities are that we want to pursue, but understand that kind of change is the only constant, and we may not.
That's exactly it.
Jobs forever.
That's exactly it. So when I first started this whole future of work project, I initially thought that the question was going to be, how do we create stability in the uncertainty of this economy? And then I realized that was a wrong question, because stability is the one thing that there isn't going to be as much of, if it ever was at all. I mean, we can go into a whole other conversation about how real or not stability is, but that's why the question is, how do we empower success in the uncertainty? Right? How do we use the uncertainty as fuel to create something amazing, as opposed to a force against which we're fighting?
Nice, amazing. Well, that's awesome. Well, I've taken up enough of your time already, but
you're awesome.
You're amazing, and I want to give you an opportunity to let people know how they can find you on the interwebs, social media and whatnot. So, how can people best find you online?
Go to your Alta Vista search engine.
Okay. Why do you guys use Alta Vista? I'm really confused about that. What movie is that from?
Parks and Rec. Hello.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Why does everybody in this town use Alta Vista?
Right. If I'm ever going to make an anything reference to you about TV or movies, just know that it's Parks and Rec. So you can go online. You can go to my website, which is elatiaabate.com. You can send me an email at my first and last name.com. And then check me out. Follow me on Facebook, social media, all of the awesomeness. I post all kinds of videos and escapades of the travels of this trip, my speeches, and other kinds of things like that. And I don't know when you're publishing this, but if it is before the end of July, come and see me up at Stanford.
Just going to be hanging out, playing
Nintendo?
Nintendo?
Yeah, I'm going to be hanging out, playing Nintendo and having somebody film me with a weird voice in the background. No.
You realize it sounds totally creepy without any context. I mean, it sounds like my Saturday night, but it still sounds creepy as hell.
Well, we're just building off of what you just said, so hopefully people didn't just listen to that piece of the whole interview, and in fact, listen to the piece ahead of you.
That's the trailer for this
Exactly.
episode.
I'll be teaching a class that I created called Prototype Your Future, which really helps people create the kind of awesome life that they're looking to live.
It's amazing. And I would highly recommend that anybody who's listening to this, check you out online. But specifically, who do you think should be connecting with you, even if they don't realize it yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Anybody who has even the smallest inkling inside of themselves that there's something more out that they could be getting out of their professional lives, right? Like when that voice comes in your head and you're sitting at your desk and you're kind of looking around and it's maybe like 7:30 or 8 at night, and you're like, is this what it's all about? The minute that thought hits your mind, reach out to me, because yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for your time. You're the best.
Thank you again so much for your time. You're the best. Thanks for inviting me on. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And thanks to everybody for listening and watching. And, I don't know, whatever else it is you're doing. Until next time, this is Sean with The Rebase Show signing off. Thanks, everyone.